The logline of Scavengers follows two characters:
a tenacious tinker named Pin-Pin,
and a mischievous magpie, Matilda,
vie for a bottle cap and fight over it.
The original pitch for Scavengers was not a handicraft world at all. Pin-Pin was like a little trash man. That was inspired from when I was younger. I did a lot of makeshift sculptures, kind of like Forky from Toy Story 4. I used to make a lot of those for the gardens from my mom, and everything else was pretty much inspired from my time in Puerto Rico.
A stray dog named Cobb
summons Ginny, a jaded djinn who tries to solve his wishes
while uncovering that his true wish is friendship.
Originally, to research the location, we reached out to a ton of Middle Eastern clubs at UCF, and the head of the Middle Eastern Studies responded back to us and referred us to Dr. Zeyna, who was visiting from Turkey as a guest speaker at UCF. And when we made a meeting with her, we discussed the different areas which we were planning to possibly set the film in, and we had Mardin, Turkey as our #1 area. However, since she was from Turkey, she referred us to a specific jinn named the Shamaran, which was one of the only jinns in the lore which was not seen either negative or positive, so we kind of decided to go that way, which also led us to the area of Mardin. However, since Mardin is a little more city-like, we decided to go with Dara, which was a little more reserved since it was a 2-character film.
Learning how to rig has been one of the most challenging things I've ever had to do. It is a lot of troubleshooting, it's a lot of research, it's a lot of going back and forth and trying multiple different setups and seeing which one works the best, because you always want to make sure you're providing the best rig for your animators to use, and so you have to go through so many different scenarios that they might need to use the rig for.
We chose to go a route where we had a realistic bird rather than a bird that uses its hands to pick things up, kind of like Rio. Rio has like the birds that are very expressive with their wings, like their hands, but we chose to have realistic bird movements. And from the words of my professor, birds are the most difficult rigs to accomplish successfully, and for it to have come out of this program by like Kylie is absolutely insane.
So Matilda's rig was a difficult process to begin. I started off with a lot of research into specifically bird rigging, which there is very limited resources out there. Essentially, the most difficult challenge was trying to create her wings and give them the ability to flap like a bird, but also not clip through each other, and to allow her to also use her legs like a bird. But they needed to have some adjustments, so they weren't exactly like how most quadrupeds were. And then also her talons needed the ability to basically move like hands, but also operate like feet.
I definitely think there has been a huge challenge in the genie rig. It's interesting having a character who's perpetually floating, who doesn't have legs.
The biggest thing that we were kind of finding with like the difficulties of rigging was just making a character move in a way that gave the illusion that they were suspended in air, but it was kind of difficult to balance a system that almost had a character and an anchor in one spot, and how they move kind of separately of each other, but still remaining attached. So that was kind of a particularly difficult process, trying to find that like middle ground. And what we ended up kind of going with was normal character rig, but then there's just this little prop attached to her, and that prop has sort of switches that you can turn off and on to influence parts of her body, specifically like the tail she's attached to, and how that moves and how stretchy it can go, or maybe how wiggly it is, because she has that genie quality, so she has a lot of that wiggliness to her as well.
To my knowledge, while we've had flying characters in the past, I don't know if we've ever had a character who didn't have legs at all. And partnered with the fact that there's a quadruped rig in Kolb have been very, very tricky to both build and to animate with.
I started rigging Kolb kind of not knowing much about rigging at all, and it was something that was specifically tough for his hind legs. We used something that's not commonly used, a spring solver, to get that bend on both of his knees, so it like crunches together instead of just like one knee bend kind of thing. And that was really tough. That was something that's not commonly used in rigs for quadrupeds, so we've had a lot of problems that we had to troubleshoot to get that perfect. And we've gotten to a point where it's pretty usable, but still, like any rig, things keep happening, you have to keep working on it, so it's kind of a process that never really ends.
We also have something called XGen, and we have lots of those kind of textural feels because of the handicraft appeal that we have. There's things like felt, cotton, yarn, and compared to past years, I feel like We've really dedicated the time to creating like an asset library to help us really hone in what is the feeling of scavengers.
XGen is a tool that we use in Maya to create hair and then populate that hair several times throughout the scene across geometry that is created.
XGen, the way that we have been using it, is not the way it's intended to be used. The previous years have always warned us of XGen and be like, be warned, fellow traveler, don't get near it. But, you know, I'm very proud of our team in terms of how they've done it because we found a new way to use it.
I'm responsible for specifically putting Pin's XGen on him. He has XGen on his hair, which is made of yarn. So it has these little fuzzy fibers that we've used with the XGen to create the illusion of fuzz. I've created XGen for Pin and then also for the environment, which were on felt squares. And for both of those, it's like a design process that we went in first where we played around with different procedural sliders and values that you input into the computer that change the way the hair looks. So there's like a curl attribute that will change how curly the hair is and how many times it coils and how many strays it has and how much noise and variation there is, and all of those things after you put in all of those inputs come together and make the hair the way that it will look. So in that design process we're playing around with all of those things, and then once we have that design and we've settled on it, then for the environment we moved it into a preset so that it could be applied directly into the environment file on different fabric patches because we wanted it to be replicatable throughout every scene. And then for Pin's, instead of having a preset, it was just applied directly onto his rig, and then that rig is then referenced into the scene.
For my film, every week, I would say I have probably put in more hours than a full-time job, depending on the workload for that week. I've worked 40 hours, I've worked 70 hours, I've worked 80 plus hours on the film per week. It really just depends. Animation takes a lot of time, and because we're students, we're still learning and we're still growing, so not everything's going to be perfect the first time we do it. So sometimes we have to go back and redo it, but I've definitely put in full-time hours every week. It's just a very long process, and it was probably Matilda's wings, if I'm being honest. Rigging every single feather took a very long time. Very long time, and if you make one mistake, you gotta go all the way back.
I'm kind of getting up to over 40 to 45 hours, I'd say on average. It varies because we find that maybe a 1 week is easier to finish up work during class, and then there's times like now where we're like crunching 10, 11 hours days on occasion, and those are painful, but need it though. We'll either do a trip to Wawa or we'll just take a walk down the road. It's those outside little activities to walk away, to get my feet moving, like helps a lot.
I think I'm just most proud of all of my teammates. They have put in so much passion into this film and have continuously elevated each other and supported one another throughout the entire process. And we have just continued to step up the quality of our textures, our lighting, our animation. Everyone is working really hard to put out something that we're all really proud of. And I am just incredibly in awe of how talented they all are.
I am incredibly proud of the team being willing to step up and try and tackle new things that they may not have an interest in or may not have any experience in, and still managing to bring an amazing product to the table. I hope that when people watch the film, that they can take away this feeling of warmth that comes from having a happy ending and fun characters interacting, and just the joy of animation as a whole.